reports coming out of royal circles suggest that Prince William's patience has reached its absolute limit. For years, according to insiders, the Prince of Wales has watched his younger brother and Meghan Markle criticize the monarchy in interviews, documentaries, and Harry's memoir. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. But now, sources claim William has zero tolerance left. He is said to see their actions not just as personal attacks, but as continuous attempts to damage the public image and credibility of the British royal family. And this growing firmness from William, insiders say, has left Prince Harry deeply uneasy. A recent report published by International The News adds a new layer to this unfolding tension. Royal commentator Tom Bower explained that Harry is increasingly afraid of what the future could look like for him, especially once King Charles is no longer on the throne. Bower stated that Harry is seriously worried that when his father dies, William will literally banish him, adding that the Duke of Sussex fears he could end up with no status in Britain at all. According to the expert, Harry is beginning to realize that he might become persona non grata, unwelcome and without royal standing, in the country he was born into. These concerns aren't simply emotional or symbolic. Insiders allege that several members of the monarchy believe Prince William is preparing for a major restructuring of the royal hierarchy once he becomes king. Part of that plan reportedly involves stripping the Her Royal Highness designation from all non-working royals. For years, the royal family has faced criticism for maintaining ties with individuals who neither represent the crown nor support its public duties. William, determined to modernize the monarchy, is said to be drawing a firm line. According to these sources, Harry and Meghan are expected to be the first names on that list. If true, this move would have far-reaching consequences. Losing the HRH status would make it significantly harder for Harry to hold any meaningful position, influence, or even formal respect in Britain. The same applies to Meghan, who has already faced intense scrutiny from critics who question her connection to the royal family after leaving her duties behind. Insiders also noted an unexpected detail in the report. Losing British royal privileges would complicate Harry's ability to travel and engage internationally, including his frequent visits to places like India, where diplomatic and royal status still play symbolic roles. This speculation comes against the backdrop of King Charles's recent decision to remove Prince Andrew's titles following a widely reported scandal. That precedent has fueled lawmakers who are now pushing the removal of titles bill in the UK Parliament. The purpose of this bill is clear: to give the monarch full legal power to revoke titles from royals who no longer serve or who generate controversy damaging to the crown. If passed, not only Charles, but eventually William, would have an unchallenged authority to strip titles permanently. Meghan Markle's situation is also receiving renewed attention. The actress-turned-royal was given the title Duchess of Sussex upon her marriage to Prince Harry, a title that instantly made her one of the most talked-about women in the world. However, according to these new reports, her title may not be as secure as many assume. Should Prince William ascend the throne, there is growing belief among insiders that he may decide to remove the Sussex titles altogether, especially if the couple continues to distance themselves from royal duty or release projects that criticize the institution. Taken together, these developments paint a picture of a royal family preparing for dramatic internal reform. Prince William, widely known for his sense of duty, seems poised to enforce a stricter and more disciplined vision for the monarchy, one that leaves little room for individuals who, in his view, undermine the institution from the outside. For Harry, this creates a ticking clock. The bond he once had with his brother is now overshadowed by deep distrust and public conflict. And as the future draws closer, he appears increasingly afraid that once William becomes king, all remaining bridges could be burned for good. The morning light over London often carries with it a sense of history, a soft, muted glow that settles over the old stone buildings, threading itself between the narrow streets and pausing over the centuries-old monuments that stand as reminders of the monarchy's enduring presence. But on this particular morning, there was something heavier in the air, something that whispered through Kensington Palace courtyards and drifted across the quiet grounds of Windsor. Every royal attendant felt it, every insider sensed it, and every whispering voice within the palace walls repeated the same troubling thought: Prince William had reached a breaking point. For years, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had stepped away from royal duties, crossed oceans, and built lives far from the pomp and protocol they once shared. But even continents away, Their words and projects sent tremors back to Britain. Interviews hinting at mistreatment, documentaries dissecting the family's failures, a memoir filled with wounds left open for the world to examine, each revelation struck deep. While King Charles maintained a public posture of calm resilience, insiders whispered that it was Prince William whose patience had begun to erode like chalk cliffs battered by relentless waves. William, the future king raised on the weight of duty, had weathered storms before. But nothing prepared him for the magnitude of betrayal he felt watching his own brother, once his closest companion, stand at the center of criticism aimed squarely at the monarchy they were raised to protect. The bond forged in their youth, strengthened by grief and shared responsibility, now felt fractured beyond repair. Every time Harry spoke publicly, every time Meghan made a remark that fueled global media narratives, William felt another thread of trust unravel. The tension had grown so visible that those closest to the royal family began to sense a cold determination forming within the heir to the throne. It wasn't anger in the traditional sense, no shouting, no rage-filled displays. Instead, it was the silent kind, the type that settles deep inside a man shaped by discipline and decades of preparation. William had become resolved, almost chillingly so. Reports began to circulate that he had zero tolerance left for the actions of his younger brother and sister-in-law. And now, that simmering resolve had begun to manifest in ways that left insiders deeply uneasy. Beneath the calm appearances of royal life, Prince Harry was growing restless. Far from Britain, surrounded by the comforts of a Californian estate, he nevertheless felt the looming shift in the winds of monarchy. Behind every headline and every whispered report, he sensed a threat more personal than anything he had faced before. It was not just public opinion he feared, nor the scrutiny he had grown accustomed to. It was the fear of disappearing from the royal framework entirely, of becoming someone stripped of the history, the identity, the heritage he was born into. Royal expert Tom Bower summed up these anxieties in one stark statement: Harry was deeply worried that once King Charles was gone, William would waste no time in cutting him out of the monarchy for good. The idea struck Harry in a place he didn't want to acknowledge. Becoming persona non grata in Britain was no longer a distant fear, it was a possibility intensifying with every passing week. And the more William's determination became visible, the more Harry felt the ground beneath him shift. Behind palace doors, whispers continued. William, they said, was preparing for a monarchy defined not by tradition alone, but by accountability. He was ready to remove Her Royal Highness designation from non-working royals and streamline the institution into something undeniably modern. And though many names floated through those hushed conversations, two stood out more clearly than the rest: Harry and Meghan. The implications were enormous. Without the HRH designations, without the official royal identity, Harry would stand in a strange limbo, royal by blood but unattached to the institution. A prince with no place, a duke without recognition, a figure whose significance had been slowly peeled away. For Meghan, the consequences were equally grave. The title of Duchess of Sussex had become part of her public identity, a symbol of the status she gained upon marrying into the world's most famous royal family. But that title, too, hung by a thread. The looming threat became even more real as the British Parliament pushed forward the Removal of Titles Bill. This was not speculation, it was a tangible legal doorway being crafted to give the monarch the authority to strip titles from those who no longer served the crown or who brought controversy to its doorstep. King Charles had already demonstrated his willingness to enforce consequences, having removed Prince Andrew's titles amid scandal. But the whispers insisted that William would go further, sweeping away titles as part of a larger cleansing of the royal slate when his time came. These developments reached Harry like distant thunder, far away, yet impossible to ignore. Every new report felt like a warning that the future was changing faster than he had prepared for. He had once walked palace halls with the assurance of a prince who knew his place and role. Now he felt as if he were standing on the edge of an unraveling tapestry, watching threads of identity and legacy being pulled away. Meanwhile, Meghan found herself caught between two worlds. She had once been warmly welcomed into the royal fold, stepping into her role with the elegance and poise that had defined her career in the entertainment world. Becoming the Duchess of Sussex had elevated her into a global figure of both admiration and controversy. Yet now, with William's potential rise to the throne, the security of that title seemed uncertain. Insiders murmured that if William believed removing the Sussex titles would restore stability and respect to the monarchy, he would not hesitate. All of this unfolded behind the scenes: quiet rooms, private discussions, late-night conversations between advisors and the future king. But the implications were enormous, and the world sensed the shift even without hearing the details. A monarchy preparing for transformation. A future king ready to draw boundaries. A brother watching his royal identity slip through his fingers like water that refused to stay cupped in his hands. In this growing storm, Chapter 1 ends not with resolution, but with tension thick enough to reshape the future of the monarchy. The threads of loyalty, power, family, and identity were beginning to tighten. And as Britain looked toward the future, one truth became clearer than ever: the battle for the soul of the royal family had only just begun. Dawn had barely broken over Buckingham Palace when the corridors began humming with a different kind of energy, one that came not from ceremony nor celebration, but from quiet strategic movement. Advisors moved with urgency softened by discretion, their steps echoing off polished floors as conversations blended into a low, serious murmur. The monarchy had always been an institution of tradition, but tradition alone could not shield it from the changing tides. And at the center of those tides stood Prince William, the man destined to inherit not only a crown, but the many fractures threatening to weaken it. As the nation watched from afar, a quiet transformation was unfolding behind closed doors. William had begun holding private meetings with senior advisors, men and women who had guided the monarchy through decades of upheaval. These sessions, usually held in discreet rooms away from the public eye, grew longer and more intense as reports about Harry and Meghan continued to stir tension across the British press. Each new story added to the urgency William felt. The monarchy could not continue with inconsistent narratives, open conflicts, and royals acting independently of the crown's values. In these meetings, William's demeanor was unmistakable. Calm, measured, unyielding. Every word he spoke carried the weight of someone who understood his responsibility not as a future king alone, but as a guardian of an institution older than almost any in the modern world. Advisors remarked privately that William had grown into a version of leadership few expected at such an early stage: stronger, firmer, and far more decisive than the public had ever seen. Yet beneath this composed exterior, there was something deeper, a sense of personal woundedness that could not be soothed by protocol or strategy. The betrayal he felt from Harry was not simply about public criticism or controversial interviews. It was the loss of a bond he once cherished. William had always believed that he and Harry would step into the future side by side, upholding the legacy of their mother. But as Harry drifted further from the family, embracing a life of independence and media exposure, the dream of a united brotherhood became little more than a fading memory. As these emotional undercurrents flowed beneath the surface, the palace faced practical concerns. The public's trust in the monarchy needed rebuilding. The scandals, divisions, and explosive revelations from Harry and Meghan's projects had left fractures in the institution's once solid reputation. And now, with King Charles focused on his own reign, a reign marked by delicate balance between tradition and modernization, William found himself preparing for the next chapter, a chapter that might require stronger measures than anyone expected. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Harry sensed the walls tightening around him. California offered sunshine and privacy, but it did not silence the news coming out of Britain. Every headline hinting at William's resolve sent a cold ripple through him. What had once felt like rebellion, breaking free from royal constraints, now felt dangerously close to isolation. The sense of freedom he and Meghan once embraced had begun to intersect with the reality of consequences. For Meghan, the situation was equally complex. She watched the growing storm with a blend of defiance and apprehension. Once celebrated as a refreshing addition to the royal family, she had since become one of the most polarizing figures in royal history. Her title, Duchess of Sussex, was more than a formality, it was a part of her identity, the bridge between her Hollywood past and her royal chapter. But now, even that was under threat. If William believed future stability required removing titles, neither privilege nor popularity would guarantee immunity. Back in London, the discussion surrounding the removal of titles bill gained momentum. Parliament had grown concerned about the inconsistencies in the royal family, individuals who used their titles for influence while distancing themselves from duty. The bill's supporters argued that the monarchy could not retain credibility if it allowed non-working royals to benefit from the advantages of status without upholding the responsibilities tied to it. This was no longer just about Harry and Meghan, it was about redefining what it meant to carry a royal title. And yet, despite the political angles and legal structures forming around this potential reform, at the heart of it remained a deeply personal conflict. King Charles struggled quietly with the realization that his sons were drifting further apart than he had ever imagined. His reign had barely stabilized, and already the future of the monarchy carried shadows shaped by familial division. Charles hoped, perhaps naively, that time would heal the rift. But the forces shaping William's decisions were bigger than emotion, they were rooted in a need to preserve the monarchy's future. As the day faded over London, the palace grounds grew quiet again. The grand gates stood tall, the gardens glowed softly in the amber evening light, and the city moved on with its usual rhythm. Yet inside, a silent tension clung to every corner. Every advisor, every attendant, and every informed insider knew the same truth: the monarchy was entering a season of transformation. The conversations had shifted from if to when. And as Prince William prepared for the inevitable weight of the crown, one reality grew sharper with every passing moment. The decisions he would make about his brother, his sister-in-law, and the titles they carried would not only reshape their futures, they would redefine the monarchy for generations. Night had wrapped itself around London like a deep velvet cloak by the time Prince Harry finally allowed himself to sit alone in the quiet of his study. The large windows of his Montecito home framed a peaceful landscape, palm trees swaying gently in the breeze, the distant shimmer of the Pacific reflecting moonlight. It should have brought comfort. It should have reminded him why he left Britain in the first place. But instead, the silence felt intrusive, almost accusing, as if the world itself had paused to watch him confront the very thing he had been avoiding for months. On the desk before him lay a stack of printed articles, headlines from UK newspapers, excerpts from royal commentators, and most troubling of all, reports about William's growing determination to restructure the monarchy. Harry did not want to believe them. He didn't want to accept that the boy he once rode bicycles with through palace paths, the brother who sat beside him during some of the darkest moments of their lives, could now be preparing to strip him of the last ties he had to his birthright. Yet every report, every whisper, every small sign pointed in the same direction. Harry leaned back in his chair, staring at the words he had already memorized: persona non grata. It echoed in his mind, a phrase that carried a weight he wasn't prepared to face. Becoming unwelcome in Britain wasn't just a matter of losing a title or a ceremonial privilege, it meant losing a connection to his mother, to his heritage, to the country whose soil held memories he could never replace. And despite all the disagreements, despite the interviews and the criticism, part of Harry still believed he belonged to that world. But the reality was changing faster than he could keep up with. Across the room, Meghan walked in quietly, watching him with a mixture of concern and frustration. She had seen this pattern before: the way negative press tightened around him like a net, the way his silence grew heavier. She didn't need to ask what was wrong, the papers on his desk said it all. For months, she had stood firm, insisting that distance from the institution was the healthier choice, the stronger path for their new life. But even she could not deny the sudden intensity of these reports. Losing their titles wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration of separation so sharp it threatened to carve their identities into fragments. Meghan approached him gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. Harry did not look up. Instead, he whispered under his breath, "He really means it this time." The sadness in his voice was heavier than anger, deeper than conflict. It was the voice of a man realizing that the safety net that had always been beneath him, royalty, family, duty, was no longer there. Meanwhile, back in London, the palace continued its quiet preparations. William had begun reviewing legal frameworks with advisors, assessing the practicalities of title removal and the limits of royal authority. Every advisor who entered those meetings came out with the same impression: William was resolute. He believed that the monarchy's survival depended on not only modernizing its public image but taking firm action against internal conflicts that eroded public trust. It was not revenge he sought. It was order. Throughout his life, William had been taught that the crown was bigger than any individual, even bigger than personal pain. And though he had once hoped his brother would find a way back, his hope was slowly being overtaken by duty. He saw a monarchy burdened with confusion, with mixed messages, with scandals that continued to overshadow genuine service. And in William's mind, the simplest path to clarity was removing all ambiguity about who represented the crown, and who did not. The discussions surrounding the removal of titles bill intensified in Parliament. Some lawmakers argued it was long overdue, especially after recent royal controversies. Others worried it could set a precedent that disturbed centuries of royal protocol. Yet the momentum behind it could not be ignored. Every scandal involving a non-working royal, every headline questioning the monarchy's relevance, every public criticism seemed to strengthen the argument for change. Among the staff who had served the royal family for decades, concern grew quietly. Some feared the reforms would deepen the fracture between the brothers beyond healing. Others believed the monarchy needed this transformation to survive the next century. What none of them knew was that William had already made his emotional decision long before any legal conversation began. He would protect the monarchy, even if it meant sacrificing the last fragile threads holding his family together. In America, Harry found himself caught between two realities. On one hand, he had built a life rooted in independence, freedom from royal protocol, a new home, new projects, and a family of his own. On the other hand, the royal identity he carried from birth felt like a tether he could not fully sever. Losing it was like losing a part of himself he never intended to abandon, no matter how far he had traveled. The pressure mounted. Meghan urged him to focus on the future they built together. Advisors encouraged him to shape his own narrative independent of the crown. But late at night, when the world went quiet, Harry found himself replaying childhood scenes, running